but I still have the archive of the back issues. There are 55 back issues, and I'm just waiting for, I think, 6 more members to request access, and then I'll start publishing new ones. I wanted to get to 100 people receiving it, so it was actually worth doing. And then there's finally there's a paid-for one called SAS Programming Forum, which includes a SAS course, which you might be interested in. It's not at all expensive. Price is £5 sterling a month. I think that's $7 US. I'm not quite sure of the exchange rate for Canadian dollars, but as you can see, it's not very much. There are also some job adverts that appear occasionally on there in their own section. And then there's an area called the product shop, where you can download free papers, and you'll be able to download this one with all the sample code after we've finished. There are also links to various books I've produced in the past, some Android apps, and also some other programs which may be of interest. Anyway, let's get to the subject that you're all here to learn about, and that's ODS graphics. Now, ODS graphics was part of SAS Graph in SAS 9.2, and it was experimental before that. But in SAS 9.3 and beyond, it's actually been part of base SAS. So the original title for this paper had something for nothing before it, which caused some difficulties as SAS Global Forum had presented it in, because they ran out of space in the sheet with the timetable and truncated it to something for nothing. No mention of ODS graphics at all. So I had people coming up to me asking whether I had candies for them to take away. Now, it's not free, but you don't have to pay extra license fees for SAS Graph if you can convert all your code to ODS graphics. Now, ODS graphics has never been marketed as a replacement for SAS Graph, but you may be able to replace a lot of the common graphs, and I want to show you how you can do that. Okay, let's move on to the agenda. This is what we're going to do over the next 20 minutes or so. I'm going to show you briefly most of the common graph types produced by ODS graphics. The introduction will give you some background to how it all works and why the quality, as you'll see as the presentation goes on, is quite a bit better in ODS graphics than SAS Graph. I used to be a really big fan of SAS Graph, I hasten to add, but the last time I actually used real SAS Graph was by accident when using Enterprise Guide, because the tasks there use SAS Graph rather than ODS graphics. Now I tend to use SAS Studio tasks instead, and they're all ODS graphics, and so I feel a lot happier. Then you can see the scatter plot, line plot, and error bars. They're all basically the same plot with different parameters that you need to put in. Regression plots are also very impressive, as are the box plots. And then the vertical and horizontal bar charts will investigate in a little bit of detail. And finally, I'm just going to mention pie charts, and then we'll have some conclusions after that. When I was developing this paper, I thought it might be a good idea to put some sort of label on each type of graph as to whether they're easy, difficult, or impossible to do in ODS graphics. The easy ones, you just replace one procedure statement with an ODS graphics procedure. Maybe there's a need for sorting, but nothing very difficult. However, the difficult ones will probably require you to use proc template or some pre-processing to make the data suitable for the procedures. The impossible ones, there are a couple that you'll see a bit later, although I'm not aware of anyone who would really want to use it, apart from possibly some newspapers who like producing really flashy graphs that have no meaning. But we'll see what happens as we go along. Okay, so the first one. This is scatter plot. And as I've said, it's easy. The one on the left is from SAS Graph. The one on the right is from ODS Graphics. And you can see the version that it came from. So in 9.2, you produce that graph, and if you produced it now in 9.4, it'll look exactly the same. And you can see there's a lot of empty space on SAS Graph version, and things get squeezed up to the edge as well. Whereas in ODS Graphics on the right-hand side, you can see that all the space is used, but there is no blank space added. And I don't think you really need to know that the top right-hand point is at, I think it's 72, because you can see pretty much it's at 72 anyway. There's no need to label it. And this is done so that you don't have to do a lot of coding to pick a graph that will fit the area that you're interested in. And there are tick marks you can put in, but in general, do you need them? No, you probably don't. The other interesting part is in the legend at the bottom. You'll see that in SAS Graph, the F data comes first in the legend, and M comes second. And in ODS Graphics, the M is before the F. Now, the reason for that is there is an implied sort in procgplot, and so it sorts by the key. And so F is before M, and so that's the way that the legend is specified. In sgplot, there is no implied sort. You have to do it yourself. And I'm using sashelp.class, and those of you who know sashelp.class and have used it before will know that the first member of the class is a little boy with his name beginning with A, and so that's why M is first rather than F. It's the first record that it finds. The code is really simple. This scatter statement produces scatter plot. It's grouped by sex, and then the Y value is weight, and the X value is height. I'll just show you again so you can see weight on the left, height at the bottom, and then the legend is grouped on sex. The code. Now you can make it a little bit more interesting by doing a line plot. And again, I think the right-hand version is my preferred version, and I haven't done anything to it to change the colors or points. To do it in gplot, you probably need quite a few G options to achieve it. The other interesting part that I was talking about is I've had to sort the data in order to make it sensible. And so the females will come before the males. So F is first and M is second. And if I didn't do that, you get something that looks more like a tangled ball of string. The code's simple enough. We've got the sort there by sex and height, and then we're using a series statement instead, and we specified markers. It is possible to layer several of these statements together, so we could put scatter plot over the top, and you'll see that done later on. And then we could do the markers in a different color to the lines, if that's required. But in this case, I'm just doing it in a single statement. If we want to put in error bars, the series statement doesn't have an error bar capability, but scatter does. So what we've done here is we're layering on the series in other words the line, with the error bar on top. Now there's an interesting feature which is an important feature within ODS graphics. My background goes back to the days before presentations like this to overhead projectors, where you use vinyl acetate sheets rather, which are clear, and then you could put them on top of each other to create a composite plot or picture. This is what ODS graphics is actually doing. So you've got a transparent sheet that you draw a graph on, and then you can put another transparent sheet on top of that with another graph, and so on and so on. And so if you put series and then scatter in the statements, the scatter will be written second. So the lines will be put on, and then the scatter information will be laid on top. And so the points will sit on top of the line. If you reverse the order and say you put scatter first and line second, then you'll put the line over the top of the points rather than the other way around. So it gives you a lot more control with very simple syntax. And you can see here, we're doing the calculation of the error bars here. But we've got a scatter plot in this case, which is being drawn first, and then the series with the line being drawn over the top. And the value upper and value lower, oops, sorry, try that again. I have to make sure I don't touch too vigorously. You can see I'm creating these value upper and value lower variables in the input data set, and just by adding the standard error to the weight. And again, we're grouping by sex in both lines, and in each case, y is the value and x is the height. And the value, as we can see here, is weight. Regression plots. I have a problem, but my background is not really statistical, but I have a problem with the SAS graph plot. Because rather than take the data which is there for the confidence intervals, it's actually extrapolating the lines beyond the data. Whereas here in ODS graphics, you can see that the male lines are limited by where the data is and not extended beyond, and the same with the female lines as well. So there is no extrapolation at all in the data. If you were to ask me how you would create a graph like this in ODS graphics, I might struggle to do that without actually calculating the lines beforehand and plotting them on. It doesn't allow for extrapolation at the moment. But the code is also remarkably simple. So we've got the reg statement, which does the regression, and we've got the confidence limit option, and then we're setting the markers to circle. But other than that, there is no other code. So if we go back to the plot, you can see it's a very simple graph. It's automatically sized to fit the space available, and my preference is definitely for that version. Next, box plots. And I'm not being mean to SAS graph in this case. All I did was I plotted the box plot with the range that it picked itself. And whereas here you can see the limits are specified. You've got median, mean, and 75 and 25% markers. You've also got a mark where there is a single point. In other words, there's no statistics there, but you can see it. Now, I would challenge you, without expanding the screen quite a lot, that little point just above where my pointer is not really very visible. And also the width of the bars are not helpful either. And this box here seems to be trying to escape off the side of the graph, which is not making it clear at all. You could change the axes here to make it more visible, but what I wanted to do was actually just produce some code which did the basic graph. And unfortunately, the basic graph in SAS graph is not really very helpful at all. The code itself is really simple. And we've got VBox because they're vertical boxes. What you could do if you wanted horizontal box chart is write exactly the same code and just put HBox there instead. And that's the only change you would need to do. So, as I said, box plots are easy. Vertical bar charts are easy, and again, I don't need to say any more than the fact that it looks better in ODS graphics. The squashing of the bars in ProcG chart doesn't make any sense to me, but that's the way it does it. Even if it means that the axis labels have to be put in vertical arrangement rather than nicely here. The code is very simple. It's VBar, and as such, I've only put in the category. I haven't put anything more in there. I need to do a little bit of extra explanation here. When producing SAS graph split plots, I'm going to call it split because I'm going to give them different names, it refers to this particular form as a subgroup plot. Now, this one is actually a grouped plot with the group display of stacked. Having them side to side is referred to as clustered. And this name changing can cause a few problems when you first move over to ODS graphics, because the use of group is purely the splitting of the data. There's no more than that in ODS graphics. And then you have to say whether it's stacked or clustered. The code, however, is very simple. You just add group equals X to that, and the default is to do a stacked group plot. Now, that said, up to version 9.3, you couldn't do a clustered plot in ODS graphics. It came in 9.3, and so you had to cheat a little. There's another procedure called sgpanel, which allows you to group things together, which is what I've done here. And you notice there's a very close similarity between the two graphs, where there's an empty female section there under age 16. That's because there is only one subject in SAS help.class that is age 16, and I think his name's Philip. So what you have to do is specify panel by, and in this particular case you need to tell it how many columns you're going to put in as well, which means it's not really very flexible. But again, you're just using VBars X and then paneling it into separate panels. in 9.3 maintenance 1, SGplot gave you the ability to use this clustering. Now you notice the change here, that it will cluster all the items with the same age around the midpoint. And as there is only one point there, it clusters that one around the midpoint. If you want to make a space like you have in this one, you need to put in an extra record with a missing value. And so it doesn't produce a bar, but it produces a space. I haven't done that here, but it's just a warning that you may get graphs that you don't expect. But the difference here, remember I said that group display defaults to stacked. You need to put in group display equals cluster to produce a clustered bar chart. But again, very simple. Now, I've called this easy, which it isn't really. I've cheated. If you use horizontal bar chart in G-chart, it adds a statistics table on the right-hand side. Now, what I've done with SGplot is I've ignored that and I've just produced the graph itself. Now, I haven't come across anyone that has come to any of my presentations who ever makes use of this little table. And what they tend to do is switch it off. So there are options to say no frequency, no percent, and this will disappear. So in that case, as I say, I'm cheating, but this is quite easy to do. And you just use H bar rather than V bar to produce it. It is possible. Well, it became possible in 9.4 maintenance 1 to add this table. It's what's called an axis table, and in this case, it's a y-axis table. But there are severe difficulties getting the data close enough together so that it fits the space better than it currently does. So you tend to get a squashed graph and very little, because there's very little space for the graph itself. And then the data in the table gets stretched quite wide. I don't like that particular method. It actually works better if you have it as an x-axis table. And so you're putting in values underneath the x-axis rather than beside the y-axis. And say I'm not keen on that, and the need to actually do quite a bit of programming beforehand. So this is just working out cumulative frequencies and percentages before we even get to the code. And that's the code, and you then put a y-axis, specify where you want it to be and where the labels sit. So again, that's difficult. And again, you can do stacked bar charts, and I've not put in the table in this case. And that's, you just add a group to it and everything works. Again, it's difficult to do stacked, and what you've actually got there is not what you would expect. So this frequency here is actually from the top bar. So, my apologies, sorry, the bottom bar on each one. In this case, there is only one, and so it picks the first one. So not very helpful. Actually, I'll start again. It picks the top bar. So that's one, That's 3, and there's 2 more. There's another one there, 2, 2, and 1. You can see those values. The rest is actually lost somewhere, because you can't have an access table with 2 lines for each row. You can only have 1. So while it's difficult, it's actually wrong as well. And again, you need to do all this calculation beforehand to get the information in, and the access table is set up the same way. If you want to do a clustered bar chart in the horizontal, again you need to use SGPanel up to before SAS 9.3. But it's easy enough to do. You just specify the number of rows rather than columns that we had before. And then from 9.3 you could use the clustering option. And again, it centered the final bar in this case. And this is group display equals cluster. That's all you have to change. If you want to do a clustered bar chart and put a table on it, I've not found it possible to do, and I've been using it up to SAS 9.4 maintenance level 6, which is the latest version, and you can't do it because the access table will only work with 1 key variable. And you see we've actually got 2 key variables there. We've got age and we've got sex, and so it gets confused. You can do it, but you need to plot each point separately, and so effectively produce another graph with all these values plotted along the side, which I'm not sure it's necessarily impossible, but it's more work than it's worth. Okay, pie charts I've got as difficult mainly because I'm using proc template, and you'll notice there are some differences, one of which I've deliberately done the ODS graphics version as a mirror image of the SAS graph, more because I could rather than anything else. I'll show you in the code how to switch it around should you want to. There's also a theory that if you're producing a pie chart, producing more than 2 segments can be very misleading. And so in this case, the preference would be to have the largest one here and then another one for the rest. So you can actually see the difference, whereas I don't know whether it's obvious that these 2 are not the same size. Other than the fact I've actually labelled the numbers for me. The code is relatively straightforward. You create a template, and then you use the pie chart statement from graphics template language. And you see I put category direction equals clockwise. By default it's anti-clockwise, and starting at 0. So what I've done is I've switched it around. And then you just use proc-sg render with a template of pi, which is what created here, to produce the output. So that's the basic bit on pie charts. The other impossible one is 3D pie chart. Now, I have never liked it, and I can give you plenty of examples that I've come across where just by rotating a 3D pie chart, you can get a completely different view on the data, which can be contradictory. So I was quite pleased when I talked to the developers of the ODS graphics, but they don't like it either. and they, at the last time I spoke to them, they had no intention of supporting it in a future release, which means that it doesn't prevent SAS users who wish to create these charts, if they really want to, but they're definitely going to have to license SAS Craft to do it. So there is a price to pay for 3D pie charts. Just coming to conclusion, and then I'm happy to take questions. Is it possible for you to convert all your plots to ODS graphics? So the question you need to ask is, do you only create plots and no charts? Then the chances are you can convert all your SAS Craft to ODS graphics in 9.2 or 9.3 and beyond. If you create bar charts, do you want to draw horizontal bar charts with the extra information that's produced? And as I said, I've not come across anyone recently that even considers that. So it should be possible, if you don't want to produce those extra text values, to convert your programs from SAS Craft to ODS graphics, again in 9.2 or 9.3. However, if you require horizontal clustered bar charts with large amounts of text, 2D or 3D pie charts, then I'd recommend you keep your SAS Craft license for now, as ProcGChart is not going away in the foreseeable future, and it will do what you want to do. Okay. The key part on this slide, that's the blog address. If you want to go down to in the blog address and find the papers, you'll see there's a product category called Woo Papers. The reason for Woo is it's an e-commerce package called Woo Commerce, and so I kept Woo in there just to remind me what I'm using. All the papers are free to download, but it will go through a checkout page. When you get there, you'll notice that the total that you owe is 0. So don't panic if you think I'm going to charge you for the papers. I won't. It's just a matter of controlling who downloads the papers from the website. And so, other than that, the blog site you can reach through there. I've deliberately not put HTTP or HTTPS on these links. I'm in the process of upgrading my blog server to use secure HTML, and so it will change over time. So if at first it fails, it probably means it should be HTTPS. However, this blog link will always be HTTP, and then it will reroute to the correct site, so it will correct for you. So going through that route will always get you into the site if you wish. Okay, thank you. So if anyone has any questions, then I'm more than happy to take them.
Any question online, or if we can go to the next presentation. Any question? Participants, just let me stop this one, sharing. We are still seeing your presentation. Let me see. Okay.
Okay.
Anyone have question for Phil? We know, for example, for some we use to make graph, we are using the quit at the end as proc SQL.
Yes. Okay.
And do you know what is like the difference between the proc we use to make graph and the proc we are using making graph and adding the quit at the end? Otherwise, if we don't add the quit at the end, we have the same output, or anything different from adding quit and not at the end?
You don't. I don't think you have to use quit at all. SGplot just goes proc to run. You don't need. You can't do multiple graphs in a single proc step.
Okay.
Because you're overlaying them. So each time you put anything on top, it's actually overlaying the current graph. And then when you hit run, the run statement, it will then produce a new graph for the next procedure call. So it's a little less complicated. I think that and the fact you don't need any G option statements as well.
Okay, I think we have like new question coming.
Okay.
Louis is typing a question, I guess. Are you able to see the question?
Yes, I can see it's being typed as well.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's good. I think we can wait a little bit to see the question. Okay.
Yes, no problem at all. In fact, the slides, I believe Mamadou has a copy of the slides anyway. Right. But if you want to download the presentation, the paper that goes with it, and the sample code from the paper, then you can get it from my blog site. So if you just go to the Woo Papers link, so if you go to blog.hollandnumerics.org.uk, and then you should be able to get to the product shop and the conference papers and find the paper. So you'll get more than the slides, you'll get the paper as well, and you'll also get some sample code. So you can try out all the things that I've tried for yourself. And if you find any mistakes in the code, please let me know, and I will correct them.
Okay, great. Any other question, or we can move to the next presentation? Okay, Phil, thank you so much for your presentation. And I'll share the slide with the participant. And as well, if you want to share the link where they can find that directly on your blog, please feel free to send also on the conversation box the link.
Yes, okay.
That people can download right away. They don't need to wait for me.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll put the link in the box.
Yes,
so it'll be in the conversation box. That's fine.
Great.
I can do that.
So thank you so much for your time, and I hope it's not too late in UK.
Oh no! It's just after 5 o'clock here, so very comfortable.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Well, I'll probably stay connected because I'd like to see the next presentation myself.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So let's move to the next presentation. Let me share.